Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm Andreas Xirtus. Glad to have you here. Maggot, Nicholas, everybody I've seen around. What did we cover yesterday? The flood, Pharaoh, Akhenaten, the Babylonian mathematics, Vulcan gods of Canaan. There's a bunch of stuff. But we have also been on this kind of series talking about Gnosticism, Masonry, Mormonism, all of it. It's fun. And so we're going to continue with that today. I'm going to look and see if there's anything going on in the news. Why not, right? Okay, but here's going to be where we get all Mormonized. It's going to be real fun. I'll use a different window for this, though, because there's just a lot of windows I got open, and I don't want to mess with that page too many times. Boom, this will work. Okay, so Twitter, where we look for some news sometimes. Witnesses, UAP Twitter. Blah, 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 blah. What's happening today? Anything? Anybody? Rothschilds are twinning. Let's find out what that's about. Oh yeah, Maripol's done. Maybe we should talk about Ukraine finally. No one's ever talking about Ukraine properly. I hope you guys watch Duran. Are you guys watching the Duran? I do watch the Duran. I admit it. The Duran with Alex and Alex, their locals page, their Odyssey page. Here's Alexandria, here's Alex. I like them. I think they're great. Some people think they're like supported by the Russian state. I don't think so. I really don't. Pretty sure they're just dudes. Anyway, the Duran, that's where we're going to get some data. Maripol's done. Okay, so one of the things I was hearing the other day that was really funny was the idea that they're like, Zelensky, get it? Because he won't use the Zs anymore. So it's Zelensky, because we were taking back all the Z letters. Zelensky has decided to say, oh, well, we finally evacuated the Azov battalion from Maripol into Russia. Not that we've surrendered them, but we evacuated them so that the Russians could put up tribunals and start to arrest these people for war crimes. So good job us. I mean, but it's interesting because that's your team. So you're saying, well, we surrendered them, but we didn't. You don't say that. We evacuated them. So I guess like Zelensky wins war with the cunning use of white surrender flags, I think is it's probably the actual article title it should have been. So yeah, but yeah, I would say recommend checking out the Duran. It's pretty good. You can get access to things, about the gold. Turkey will leave NATO and create new alliance. What are you guys thinking about Dr. Oz? Endorsed by Trump, not very familiar with the United States. Part of the Ukrainian conspiracy, they think they're calling it, I guess. Here's something that you would think about Turkey. Let me see if I can find this. I had a friend who wrote this little thing, and I doubt he ever wants to be re-listened to again publicly. So I'll read it privately. And I'll close my mouth as I type his name so as not to accidentally list who him is. All right, let's see. Good. No, I'm not going to tell you anything about the person. President of Turkey, Tayyip Erdogan, is a crafting, and is a smarting man. He is cunning, he is crafty, he is smart. And he has his own agenda. I can't remember. Yeah, I'm just not going to tell you. He dreams and schemes a Turkish-led Islamic caliphate. He harbors pan-Turkish sentiments, which finds resonance across the Caucasus. He has played the spoiler in Syria and in Iraq, undermining, along with the collective West, the sovereignty of Iraq and Syria. Supporting his brand of insurgency, Tayyip Erdogan, supporting his brand of insurgency in each whilst fighting our allies, the Kurds. Yes, right. I said it. I love you, Kurds. Granted, that's a quote, but I mean it. It appears that Sweden and Finland may join NATO, which by any objective analysis is against their long-term interest. For the heart of NATO is the cabal, which calls itself the United States government, which will one day sooner than later abandon its hapless allies. Well, can't find the lie. Oh, my light's not even on. Huh. I probably look all shadowy. Give me a second. That seems worth it. Okay, now with the power of science, we can see if that's any better. I'm kind of curious myself how that looks. Yeah, look at that. See? Because it's just really dark and gray sometimes. Sorry, guys. Okay, so let me continue my little pretend news segment. It appears Sweden and Finland may join NATO, which is objectives and against their long-term interests. For the cabal, will eat them. Big bad bear. But the Russian bear is the nice bear. It's Cubby Bear. Abandon its hapless allies. By those abandoned former allies will still be the neighbors to the Russian bear, with or without President Putin. Erdogan is playing his best cards. Oh no, Tayyip Erdogan is playing his cards. NATO operates on John C. Calhoun concurrent majority when it comes to inviting a new member. Erdogan has stated that he will exercise his veto as the leader of a member state if Sweden and Finland do not clamp down on the PKK sympathizers. That's the AKK, aka the Kurds. And if they do not lift the arm embargo restricting which they have imposed on Turkey. I remember a few years ago Trump had said something to the effect of, the Kurds, they're our allies. They're selling weapons to Iran. We're not thrilled about that. I thought that was adorable. He's an adorable guy, really. It's kind of funny. I think you're getting the point about the bias of this article, where it's coming from. So I'm just going to keep reading it. The United States has sanctioned Turkey because Turkey has purchased the Russian S-400 missile system. Erdogan was not to get any spare parts for the United States planes. And was not to get new fighter planes. Erdogan has emphatically said, no parts and no planes. No Sweden and no Finland in NATO. The Russians do not trust Erdogan, and rightfully so. However, and this is the important part, the Russians prefer Erdogan. They prefer him in charge of Turkey, which will always be Russia's neighbor. To some clique known kowtows in the collective West, to some clique which kowtows the collective West. By the way, if you couldn't tell, this is translated like twice over. In fact, the Russians thwarted an attempt on his life several years ago. Erdogan owes the Russians, waves their fist. It is interesting to watch Erdogan play the collective West. It is too bad that the foolish Swedes and Finns are volunteering to become a target for the collective nuclear forces. Joining NATO will not enhance their security. It will diminish their security, etc., etc. This is how people feel right now. So there's a little bit there to consider. We'll try to unpack that real quickly. Turkey, beautiful country, wonderful, important country. If you start to look into our historical stuff, it's probably the center of so many things. I don't want to go pan-Turkish nationalist pseudo-Turkology for too hard, but yeah, Istanbul is important. I think we can all admit that Istanbul and Constantinople. And it's just, let me see if I can find the article about, oh gosh, it's going to be so far along the way. What was it even? It was like Turkey. Hold on. Uh-oh. No! Did I just close my Brave windows? Okay. So Turkey, one of the things I saw recently, you just have to close your eyes and imagine while I reload my pages. Turkey had a evidence in Romania. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. There we go. Golden Varna plate. I think this is it. Romania. No? Well, okay, so basically reed boats. We're going to get into reed boats a bit. I think we got it. Is this the right page? Archimedes. Yeah, I think it's the right page. But I terrified the page, and now the page doesn't want to open right. This happens to me sometimes. Let's make sure this is all good, too. That work? Yeah, we're good. We're fine. Okay, sorry guys. It's always a learning experience for me. Okay, discovering the golden plates from Varna, northeastern Bulgaria, excavating the site of 8 pile-dwelling Acropolis. Bulgaria, in case you guys are confused about why Bulgaria. The heck does that have with Istanbul or something like Turkey? Well, we'll see in a second. Here's Istanbul right here. Okay, so the most likely way to get to Istanbul, or to get to Burgas, to get into Bulgaria, or Varna to get into Bulgaria, but probably from Burgas, is through Istanbul, right? You can even go from Istanbul and take, I was going to say bikes, but you can take carriages and things up. You could also just go to Burgas, and the way to do that, of course, would be to go through this money-collecting canal right here. Am I kidding me? Look at this. If you go through here, guess how much money you're going to end up having to deal with? and the Bosphorus Strait. Yeah, and so this story, it's not impossible to believe that someone from even Nairobi went through Cairo into Istanbul and ended up in Bulgaria and then Romania. And then into Ukraine. They uncovered a stunning hoard of over 3,000 golden artifacts, 160 copper ones, thousands of shell bracelets, and, in other words, coastal people, and several flint knives. They were dated back to between 4,600 and 4,200 BC. We haven't even really flamencoed the BC yet. That's going to be a whole nightmare in and of itself. Varna necropolis, grave offerings, including the golden plates exposition in Varna Museum. Another amazing discovery hints at rich culture that was adept at working stone and metal. I was trying to stay on news and science for a little longer. I might have to go back. But here's the point, all right? They found all these symbols, things that you're upset about. Ships that look like things from Bolivia. An evolutionary mirror of things on the other side of the world where the Mormons said things happen. That you'd be like, that's crazy. How could the Mormons say something like that? But, yeah, same kind of boats, same kind of ideas, using grasses. They do admit similarities that do not necessitate the design on the golden plates from Varna that is the same as what we can still see today, floating waters of Lake Titicaca. He's confident in the belief that the design is a woven vessel on water. He explains how the design is created on his paper on the golden plate of Varna. Here's some reed wickering work, and it goes deep into why Slavic culture comes from this ancient Egyptian culture. We can go a little deeper. I don't know if I can find this. Merlin, Set, priest, Egypt. So the idea that Merlin was a priest from Egypt. Anybody gonna let me say this? Because I remember one time I tried changing Wikipedia to tell people about a cited book I had read in military academy in Squaw Valley, and that book was about Merlin's connection to the Egyptian priesthood and the Gauls and the Britons and all this important stuff, and they just cut it out. They're like, "This is ridiculous," and I must have been what 13 or so. And so for me, that was the big obvious. That was the big obvious that Wikipedia could not be trusted from that point on after the age of 13. So I don't know, but it was not. It never made me question it because luckily I had enough data and I had books that I had bought at a bookstore that I was pretty convinced were true. So I was able to start with that instead of with Wikipedia. And not a lot of people are that lucky. But when you start to look into Naus Atino, priests, and this idea of Osarseph being Merlin or something like that. Yeah, the idea that the Egyptian priests escaped with the Gauls into Britain is not just an idea. It's literally fact. In every respect, the British have all these stories about escape. And so many of the most important saints, right? What was it? St. Patrick in Ireland. Where's St. Patrick from? Is he from Dublin? Is he? No, I don't think so. Roman Britain, born in Roman Britain, which is, okay, sure, but his birthplace is not known for certainly. I don't know. I'm pretty sure he was brought to Britain, to be honest. One of the different is Glenoventa in Cumbria. Patrick's father is described as a decurion, senator, and tax collector. All right, so this guy, really? Maybe he's born there. But he's definitely not from there. You know what I'm saying? So when you start to look into some of these priests and saints and people who brought the religion, there's Saint Victoricius of Rouen. You start to see there's a number of these guys who are, at very least, more international than they are local, more native. Acting on his vision, he returned to Ireland as a missionary. There should be a bunch here. Patrick studied in Europe at Auxerre and in the Abbey tours in St. Germain and West Germany. I mean, yeah, he'd been to a lot of these places, but he also went to Egypt. Is that not going to be here somewhere? Alexandria? Alexandria. No? St. Patrick in Alexandria. How about that? Anybody? In Rome? In Egypt. Well, you know what? Oh, that's adorable, though, right? Green pyramids. That's pretty good. I don't know, I'll save it for another time. Because we really are. I swear. We're trying to get through a little bit more of this this science stuff and this news stuff. Turkey will leave NATO, form a new alliance. We were just looking at that. Let me do the Substack. I look at, this is my buddy Substack, and Alexander Cruel. They like to read his links that he sorts through, which are pretty good news source. Climate change may think it's the world's top problem because it threatens humanity's survival. Is this right? Here's some science. We talked yesterday about Babylonian mathematics and how it's different than reality, but it's still useful. And so people are talking about not global warming, but climate change. By the way, Alexander Cruel is a very critical and suspicious young man. So he's definitely not saying this because he wants to. He's right on. You'll like the guy, and when he's looking at things like CO2 emissions and understanding that where CO2 emissions come from used to be a giant forest because forests eat the CO2, but then eventually they start to produce more CO2 than oxygen because they're eating all of the oxygen. So then you can see places that were the greatest CO2 consumers become the greatest CO2 producers. And over generations of period, it has nothing to do even with electromagnetism. Like people think that the poles are just shifting, which is really important. It is. But that's not what it's about. It's about CO2 consumption and oxygen production and ocean water evaporation, That's more. But then the main thing is feedback loops, because feedback loops do exist, and we are going to notice the entire climate terraforming over the next generation. Oh, here's a good one. China desert. Let's do the China desert. Because a deserted place, has been fixed. Guba desert, right? Is that right? The Gobi desert? Something like that? Gobi desert? There it is. The Gobi desert. Okay, so the Gobi desert news. Landing Gobi desert after 6 months in space. That's really great. 33 days ago, too. These guys landing in the desert. How great is this desert, guys? This is the biggest desert, the third biggest desert in the world, right? I think it's not the Sahara, but it's big, and it separates north steppes of Tibet into southern Mongolia, and it consumes arguably part of the Uyghur territory, and yeah, it's an important desert, the Gobi Desert. It actually, Gobi means in ancient Mongolian and parts of modern Manchurian, big and dry. It's the big dry thing. And you can see the mud spreads out from a place. It's a great way for us to learn about how sand spreads, sand dunes work, and everything else. Things that people, are you serious? Is this the wrong window? No. Wow. Embarrassing. That was all Mormon page. Gosh. Okay, Gobi Desert, guys. Get with it. The Gobi Desert. So the Gobi Desert is this huge desert in the middle of China, and it's above Tibet, arguably, and it's below Mongolia. And here it is. It's a huge desert, and here's what it looks like. Some of the places, beautiful sand dunes, but most of the Gobi Desert has these interesting rock formations. The Flaming Cliffs in Mongolia, for instance. And I'm sure you've got some great, like, they were trees are giants or something like that to say and have a beautiful, thought about it. But the most important thing is it's not your average desert. It's a very recently converted desert. Then again, it's been an important trade route forever, even though most people don't live there. And you find all kinds of crazy stuff, like, these animals that have gone extinct since then. And some of them aren't just fake, dinosaurs. Some of them are just extinct lizards and extinct animals and giant birds and things like that. Important place. The other thing is when they say dinosaur eggs, you're like, no. Well, what they're saying is that birds flew there and were able to survive. And when you look at giant bird islands, I want to say, or pterodactyl island. You can imagine what there are. There's these places where the eggs are at, and they fly far away where they're kind of safe. And deserts are great for that purpose because you can keep your eggs safe. And so one of the ways that the moa went extinct, moa, Wikipedia. We all know what you're doing with your black magic. So this big old bird is not a dinosaur from billions of years ago. It just died a few centuries ago. And he was, 12 feet tall. Pretty impressive. New Zealanders love him. And what happened? Well, they ate his eggs. He had 1 egg a year. There were no more eggs. They died out in a generation. Very quick wiping out of the bird island. And if you look at one of my earlier videos, I have a great video on New Zealand and the bird island, and also in Australia even, as a terraformed place where they burned down the Aboriginal, according to documentaries that I saw in 3rd grade as a kid. They tried showing us that the Aboriginals had burned out so much of the desert, or what was jungle and prairie and things, and it erased flora and fauna to get rid of some of these big lizards or giant birds, and particularly bigger lizards in Australia, but giant birds and small birds of all kinds, in New Zealand. Birds were just, it's all about the birdie, And so very cool. There's your bird. This comes up because of the Gobi Desert, though. Gobi Desert terraforming. Let me just show you. Terraforming the Gobi Desert. Now, this project is successful. And it started out with some lady. A big PR campaign was some lady in China in the 70s and 80s was going and planting trees along the back of her house, just not even her house, her town, so that the sand dunes would get caught by the tree line. And it worked. And who knows if it's true? Could have been. I mean, it's probably 1.5 billion people. Someone's going to try to fix nature. But that's not what this is about. This is about a state-funded effort costing millions of dollars, tons of manpower. $31 billion a year is the estimated cost that the economy of desertification. So they're not able to produce food in these areas. So they figure, let's put all of our money into saving it. And this is a huge change in the last 20 years. You've got this much desert replaced with green. And because of the way they use cross-hatching of grass and everything, they've successfully reclaimed miles and miles, 20, 30, hundreds, whatever it is, of miles of desert. And it's becoming a tourist spot. That doesn't even want to load. A tourist spot. Here you can see some examples. And it looks a lot like Egypt. And you get the idea. It's also... One of the things they had to do was tell the locals to stop letting their sheep consume the grasslands, and they now subsidized building these huge sheep buildings, which are these sheep farming in the Gobi Desert. Let me see if I can find. It used to look like this, right? And now it's let's see, Gobi factory. Anything? Can't even find it. But you know what it looks like, where they have a pen and it's a giant building and there's fans everywhere. And again, these people used to live just like Mongolians in the Dark Ages for a long time. Whoa, I don't even know what's going on there. Not sure I want to know. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff where they're completely transforming this desert, and in your lifetime it will start to look more and more green and more beautiful, and that's going to be a climate change. So good job, climate change. So let's see here. Human genomics, in particular the use of polygenic scores, should be fully embedded into social sciences. Maybe. Moon soil used to grow plants for first time ever. I don't know. From space-based solar power to travel to the world by rocket, there's more emerging space economy than just billionaire tourism. Maybe that's more important. Where's the value in all the space schmuck? It's to get people... NASA program named for the Sisters of Apollo look to land a woman and a man on the moon by 2024. So the thing is, most of the disclosure of technology has come in through military and space. So they're trying to think, hey, we can conquer nature. Maybe we can shift this whole war thing at each other to individualized goals to space. And the goal will lead us to, of course, you've heard this, they want more minerals, more resources. And if you've found a lump of gold bigger than all the gold in the earth, then what you've done is you've inflated the value of gold. And that begins the Marxist state very quickly, because then resources that we've used to define ourselves no longer matter. There's a great, DuckTales episode where they go to an island that's never heard of money before because Scrooge McDuck is tired of money. And then they start trading shells there because of Scrooge McDuck. It seems like it's just a simple episode, but the more you get into it, It's about Marxism and about the removal of scarcity and the invention of scarcity and what that does to people. Good. Got it. Okay. Let's go a little further down the list. Microgravity construction, moon soil used in plants. That's just silly. Genetics of cognitive performance, education, and learning from research policy. Genetics effect on learning. This, by the way, this article right here is the one. This is the one that's going to get me banned for today. So I'm not going to even read it. But yeah, I'm going to leave the title because you might want to know about this. Did you know that like 80% of your being seems to be decided for you? Put it like that. The genetic variation for abilities and learning is ubiquitous in animals, including in humans, for physical, cognitive, and social abilities. Empirical evidence supporting this thesis that the individual difference in humans for cognitive ability and social economic outcomes are part and due to genetic factors. It's overwhelming. Yeah, okay, I don't know. I'm gonna get this is dangerous. This is dangerous right here. You can't be reading that. Okay, tiny battery-free devices float in the wind like dandelion seeds. Isn't that adorable? That's more black hole. Yeah, we can talk about that. Nobody is gonna get in trouble for that. Yeah, let's move on. The tiny battery-free devices float in wind like dandelion seeds. These things spin. There's a chip inside. They're ultralight. They're made out of a kind of an aerogel, and it will self-power itself by moving around. So you can actually have something carried upon the wind for hundreds of miles. I think they've been 100 meters now, but you can see how far these can get sent. And it'll be a way to put RFID in plants, and you'll start to see this more and more built into nanotechnology, where a plant itself can have a genetic sequence where it produces enough lipidic plastic to store what becomes a carbon chip of some kind. It's all coming. Can we make a black hole? Yeah, but like why? Energy reaches 10 TeV, the corresponding to a Schwarzschild radius of about 10 to the minus 10, 50. Okay. Drone warfare lessons from Ukraine. I think the thing here to take away is, while a $400 drone will not be likely to go up against one of the main Russian planes, right? Like the TB2 from Turkey or whatever is the most fancy drone. You're probably going to see a TB2 before you see a Russians fighting an American or Chinese toy. But that doesn't mean that It doesn't mean that the modern planes are really ready to fight these handmade drones. That's kind of the thing. People are thinking these drones are all, they think that military technology is so great, and they think that consumer technology is so haphazard. But it's not really the truth. And because you can produce more and more drones cheaper and cheaper, having 10 or having 100 drones or having 1,000 drones compared to one plane, yeah, it's going to be more beneficial. So the Russian planes and the military industrial complex in general is not prepared to fight consumer drones. I just wanted to say that, lay it on the table. Don't think it really matters to anybody, but whatever. Okay, so let's do it. Let's talk about Mormons. Hooray, Mormonism. So the creation theory of Mormons and what it's built upon. Wait, isn't there is that all you got? Okay, fine. Yeah, because we're going to get into Gnosticism again, and Egyptology, and the stories that Joseph Smith might have had from Egypt. So from the time of early humanity, staring at the hold on, take a break. And from the time of early humankind, From the time of early humankind, staring up at the night sky or watching the sunrise, we have wondered at the vastness and beauty of this world around us. Christians have a creation story. American Indians have creation stories. But what about the Mormon creation story? What's the story there? A journey through the world literature reveals a vast host of creation stories. The diversity is amazing. I grew up with the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. I never knew there was a story about a raven that accidentally creates a man in a pea pod. In Jainism, there's never a creation, meaning that Everything that is now always has been, and merely continues to change from one form to another form eternally. Yet the fabric of diversity has a common thread running through and binding it together, mankind making all humanity united in one respect. Most of us, I don't care. The origin of the Mormon creation story needs some historical context to understand. Many creation stories have been around since, well, the beginning. Many of them have been lost in time as cultures lived, and their folklore and oral tradition died with them. Writing enables the stories to be preserved for history. Mormons, and they don't like to be called that since like 2016, so members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as Latter-day Saints or LDS, arose during turbulence amongst religious circles in the late 18th century and early 19th century as well. The movement began in the eastern United States and spread to the western American frontier. The premise of the movement, okay, just really quickly, I'm going to jump this in here. One of the craziest, most rad things Mormons did was they went to England and converted just tons of English people. And so all these British people that came over that were architects, craftsmen, weirdos in general that were in it for the long haul. They're like, oh, what's America? Oh, that's where, and you got to imagine, 1830s, someone tells you that Jesus Christ was in America. You either sink or swim, and if you go with it, you're stuck there. So they get there, the Missouri War happens, and normal Mormons who are from America can go back to their families. They can go back to New York or Pennsylvania or whatever, for the most part. Not all of them, but for the most part. English people sold everything they had, left their families to go join a cult in America. They're in it for the long haul. So that's a big reason why the Brigham Young movement worked, just because the Brigham Young, the 12, and the 70, which are the names of these groups involving the priests and the Melchizedek priesthood, which originally wasn't even a Melchizedek priesthood. It started as there's a priest class, then it became the high and the low priests, the Melchizedek and the Aaronic priesthood. Anyway, British people really cemented this as well. The premise of the movement was the practice of Christian faith began to erode and be corrupted after the apostles' death. Because of that, several bodies of believers, including LDS, broke away from mainstream Christianity. LDS formed a community and a culture quite different from anything else amongst the early Christians. No, I'm sorry, amongst Christians in general in the United States. Even practicing polygamy, Mormons believe they know the truth. Okay, the Enuma Elish is accepted as the oldest writing creation story in the world, originating as far back as the 2nd millennium BC. It remains the same as it was then. Maybe. In contrast, the Mormon creation story began less than 200 years ago and is a divergence from the original Judeo-Christian story. The primary reason for the variation is the Mormon literature used a foundation as a foundation in the Christian story. The Bible, the King James Version, is viewed as scripture amongst Mormons, just like other Christians. Additional literature is considered scripture by Mormons, such as the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. The importance of the Book of Mormon should not be underestimated, however. The Bible is often used in classroom discussions, quotes, and sermons, and is essential to missionary outreach. An LDS tenet, the 8th article of faith, holds that the Latter-day Saints believe the Bible to be the Word of God as far as it is translated correctly. The Mormons believe they translated it properly and understand the truth. How did we get here, according to the Mormon creation theory? Joseph Smith is the Mormon messenger of God and the originator of a unique concept of, in the beginning, God created. There is a male spirit recognized as the Heavenly Father. Many female spirits are wives of the Heavenly Father and called the Heavenly Mothers. Okay, so there's your beginning there. The union of the Heavenly Father and the spirit wives result in the birth of an unknown but massive number of little spirit babies. Okay, and now I'm going to just really quickly jump to something. How far do you gotta go to get to Manny again? So far. Alright, I'm going to jump to Manichaeism just for a second. Just to remind you that Mormonism and Manichaeism are really similar. You've got this idea of the origin. And the other thing is Manny drew pictures. So there's an entire book, not all of it exists still, that was drawn by their prophet. Imagine if Jesus made comic books, right? That's how cool Manny is. So one of the things that it says is that in the original, I don't know how to even explain this, in the original world, there was darkness and light, and then darkness tried to fight light, and then light impregnated. It got itself inside of darkness. And that, in other words, darkness thought it won because it consumed light, but really that just put light inside of the darkness. Nice trick. Then light birthed itself from inside the darkness. And from that came the spirit of man, and then man's job is to be vegetarian, follow the Jainist Vedic traditions. It's weird because they don't mention Jainism very well, and I can't imagine that he didn't know about Jainism. So I gotta wonder, there must be some reason he didn't talk about Jainism, even though it is connected. Then again, we don't have everything from Manny, so what do we know? I just know it was the most popular religion in the world, and the first world religion, arguably, of the post-reset. So you got these humans, and you've got some humans who are designed to, know the truth and not do anything about it, but there's certain humans out there that are supposed to know the truth, and they're supposed to act on good conscience and faith in the truth. So they're the ones who are not supposed to eat meat. They're the ones who are not even supposed to have sex. They're supposed to abstain. They become the monks and priests that eventually make their way into the traditions of, the Catholic priests who have abstaining priests. There's a term for that. The thing is that a lot of that idea of not getting married, and we're thinking, oh, did the Catholics just make that up to take over? No. There really were people that believed in this idea of not reproducing, of trying to help the people left, and Manny was all about that. And that's kind of the story there. So, but there's the mothers, and I don't think I quite got the point across that this story here, the Heavenly Father and the Heavenly Mothers, is very similar to the story of the spirits in Manny's religion. The plot thickens. One of those babies was Jesus, who was given the role of savior of humanity. Another baby was Lucifer. Oh, gosh. Do we have to do this also? Invention of name Lucifer. Really quickly, because it's interesting. In the Bible, it says Lucifer, but it didn't used to say Lucifer. That's a mistranslation. It was Hallel, meaning shining one. Hallel meaning shining one. But they used the name Lucifer, which came from something else, and it was combined. Hold on, I got a video on this somewhere. Invention of Lucifer. I haven't even gotten to Archimedes yet. Shame on me. Where's this dude? The origins of Satan. So many people got videos on this, but it was the horned Greek figure. Yeah. How a Greek god became a devil god. I'll just make sure. Mythology Explained had a thing on this. There, look at this guy. Phosphorus, okay? Eosphorus is phosphorus, okay? So let's pull that up really quickly. Yeah, and if I type in wiki, hopefully it'll just come up with the phosphorus. There you go, phosphorus, morning star. So you start looking at phosphorus, Eosphorus, and that is where they connect. They're like, oh, the morning star. I know who that is. The morning star, yeah. Oh, Lucifer. He fell down from heaven. So there's a little bit that you have to get into there, because there is a combination of a misinterpretation from the Greeks saying, oh, our buddy, our guy, Lucifer, he fell, our buddy, Phosphorus, fell from the sky. What'd he do? What'd he do wrong? Oh, he was prideful. Oh, yeah, well, we're all pretty prideful, so that makes sense. Phosphorus, Eos, Helios, Hesperus. This is I like this. I'm gonna have to get into more of the Stanislaw Vispansky's art style. Okay, so you get the idea. I just wanted to get that across to you. Let's see here. Oh, I should not have closed that window. I'm gonna need that window for later, won't I? No, I won't. I'm chill. I'll save it. Okay, and no. I will. See, and here's the kicker. Because in the biblical translation of, Isaiah, I think is where the morning star thing comes from, he doesn't say Lucifer, he says Venus. Venus. That might not mean a lot to you, but it means a lot to me. Venus is the goddess associated with Lilith and is not necessarily associated with Lucifer until this period. And we're thinking that the Athenians these Hellenists are somehow more into masculinity, but it could have also just that it's accidentally suited the nomadic peoples that were so interested in this. The late poet Ovid, speaking on Phosphorus and Hesperus, the evening star, the evening appearance of the planet Venus, as identical, making him the father of Daedalus. Also, Ovid also makes him the father of Ceyx, the Alcyclone, or the Halcyclone, and Ceyx were a wife and husband who incurred the wrath of Jupiter, Zeus. Okay, well, I'm going to have to jump in this at some point and do some more of that, but that's not today's main subject. I wanted just to get that clear to you guys. So all of this defines Mormon belief in God. There's Heavenly Father, Elohim, and the God of the Council, and Jehovah and Jesus. Here's that picture of the salamander, right? Let's get down to earth. The Mormon concept of matter has to be considered in the creation story. As far as Mormons are concerned, matter has always existed. Like the gods, creation wasn't a creation. It was more like a hostile takeover with a massive reorganization. Ooh, can I do the Mormon book? What's it called? No, not Mormon soaking. Gosh, guys, really? They're like, is that what everyone's looking at in terms of? Okay, Helaman. Okay, so the Helaman 55, I think is the one. The Secret Society. So this is pretty sweet. In the Book of Mormon, there's this idea of a secret society called the Gadianton robbers. Okay, check this out. I'm gonna go to the Gadianton robbers. So the Gadianton robbers are characters in the Book of Mormon, the Book of Helaman, that are a secret society. And so much of your life, you're thinking to yourself, man, the Mormons, they must be a secret society. They got to be something like that. But here's what's funny is they're super against secret societies in the Book of Mormon. And it's at a time when the anti-Masonry movement is big. So it's interesting because we think of it as maybe, and so many members of the early church were actually members of the anti-Masonic groups. So it's really interesting that in their book they have a story about the Gadianton robbers who swore an oath to remain secret, identified by means of secret signs and secret words. What's the combinations? Secret combinations, strange combinations, secret combinations. This was a term that George Washington used, secret combinations, to refer to Masonic. I'm gonna have to listen to this album too. Secret combinations, rhythm and blues, Masonic. Secret combinations. It's a terminology. Secret combinations refer to, you get it. And what is this? I want to know. What this is. Secret combinations entered a secret combination with Satan and became Master Mahan. According to George Smith's translation of the Bible, Cain entered a secret combination with Satan and became Master Mahan. So you got immortals. You've got people that have these secret societies. There's a New World Order stuff. If you type in the Gadianton robbers or secret combinations in Latter-day Saints, you'll see videos from the 80s, 90s, and now where church leaders are talking about the New World Order, problems with the New World Order. Kind of interesting. I mean, it doesn't say everything, but it's kind of interesting. So during the Cold War, they described communism as a secret combination. So they continued on with, and you can also say that this is maybe the pivoting of the LDS Church, because by that point it's more controlled, because they've lost everything after the fall of Joseph Smith and the control of Brigham Young, and even the reorganized centric church is because of that. Now, Mormonism and Freemasonry, founder of Latter-day Saints, older brother Hyman and his father were Freemasons. So did he hate Freemason because he was kicked out? Probably. That's, from my understanding, the most likely scenario is he was upset because he lost his own lodge, and he's like, well, screw that, I'm going to start a religion. But because of that, did Joseph Smith have access to Manichaean documents, to Gnostic texts, to every other religious occult thing? Yeah, he did. And because of that, he wrote some pretty interesting religious stories that were connected to historical context, what they believe happened after the deluge, after the flood. And his story of the children of Joseph coming with tablets from Babylon in Egypt, particularly Egypt, into Western America, where at one point Eden had been. This is not just a story. It's a very strange story on that level, because you don't need all those facts. It becomes something else. It becomes that this is a Gnostic translation. And a lot of these ideas are, I mean, maybe not translations, but transductions of stories he's already heard before. And it's pretty specific stuff. So again, who cares if it's true about when it happened? If you're aware that in the 1830s you had Masonry, anti-Masonry, the Republican Party is coming out of the anti-Mason Party, combining the pro-Mason Jacksonian Party. So all of the stories he's supposed to be pulling out of a hat, well, they're very centric to what's going on in the world right there. In the fall, blamed on Lucifer showing her falling, turned the terrestrial world into the telestial world. A world of moral ignorance became a world of moral knowledge. Look at that dog, right? So there's stuff going on here. And she's feeding him a bone, I believe. Unless it's coming out of her arm. Is that what's going on? Maybe. Earth, at this point, was considered to be the terrestrial world. Some might think it was heaven, but Mormons are very clear on this point. The terrestrial world is not heaven. Instead, it is a place of moral ignorance. Okay? So, moral ignorance, not aware black or white. This is the pre-Manichaean battle of the seven. We haven't heard much about Lucifer for a while, but he comes back on the scene. Elohim appears and rebukes Lucifer for tempting Eve and causing the fall. The Mormon version of the story is Lucifer arguing with Elohim at this point. Is Lucifer that tempts Eve, of course. Lucifer tells Elohim that he hasn't done anything different in this world than he was allowed to do in the rest of the worlds he's formed. He contended that he was merely playing his role in a preordained plan. Without temptation of Eve, there would never have been a fall, and without the fall, procreation with Adam and Eve would never have given all the innumerable spirit babies a chance to be born and take human form. Okay, and it's, again, with the whole Manny spirit babies, because that's the thing too. Basically the idea that we're trying to get, you get the point. Spirit babies is the whole point. Like, there would not be humans if evil had not been impregnated by good, according to Manny. Okay, so this is literally the same story in as many ways as possible, and serpents and everything. We'll get into that too. The fall turned the terrestrial world into the telestial world. In effect, moral ignorance became a moral knowledge. The world at this time is referred to as the lone and dreary world. Oddly enough, however, this fall somewhat seems like a divine necessity for the rest of the story, giving Satan a prominent and essential role in the Mormon creation story, in comparison to the outcast snake crawling forever on its belly in Judeo-Christian theology. Somebody made some video recently like, I can't believe that, how weird is it that his punishment is to be himself, because he's crawling on his belly. They're not getting the point that, even lizards are like the whales who have their arms implanted in. Someone brought up the difference between macroevolution and adaptation. And I love that. I mean, I'm all about microevolution. Like, my hair changes over generations, and we talk about that. But I'd like to push you a little harder, because I don't think it's enough to call it microevolutionary adaptations when your freaking arms go inside your body, right? Like, that's a little more than micro. So I just wanted to say that. But yeah, I mean, sure, maybe. Granted, I've seen humans that have had webbed babies in the 1980s. So who knows? It's not that it's impossible, but I wouldn't call it micro. Even then, I'd call it like a major mutation. According to Joseph Smith, the celestial world will continue in its current condition for 6,000 years. It will then be baptized with fire and destroyed. You see, because the Lord said he can't baptize with water again, the whole world. That's why that rainbow is that promise that next time you get destroyed, it will be with fire. But it will be renewed and return to the terrestrial place for a millennium. It will then die. Nevertheless, it will be resurrected after death, and finally take its divinely destined position of eternal heavenly glory. So there's this, universe, a struggle between good and evil. Evil is definitely a lot closer God is God. Elohim is just one of the, it seems like part of the structure of the creation. And Lucifer is maybe more powerful as a son of God this way than in regular American, regular monotheistic or henotheistic religion. This is a little bit more, and the word is Manichaean. It's a little bit more dualist, all right? This idea that, hey, there's an argument going on. Lucifer doesn't think he did anything wrong, and we're in the battle here, and the only thing we can do about it is to better the world. Well, that's a continuation of Manichaeism. So it's important. Let me jump up a little bit here. The final thoughts, subject matter, unconventional comparison and metaphor. He never intended to disrespect. The author also, Satan ridiculed some members of the Christian faith, for being false prophets when they would not profess him as the God of this world in the lone and dreary world. So, okay, I don't know. I wanted to get you across this idea. There's a lot of connections between Gnosticism, Masonry, and Joseph Smith. And Joseph Smith also studied a lot of history, apparently. I mean, he knew about Benjamin of Tudela. Benjamin of Tudela was a medieval Jewish traveler who visited Europe, Asia, and Africa in the 12th century. Vivid descriptions of Western Asia preceded those of Marco Polo by 100 years. With the broad education and vast knowledge of language, Benjamin Tudela is a major figure in medieval geography and Jewish history. Very important guy. It's interesting that he's been places a century before, and he's also been to all the places I've been in Spain. Started in Zaragoza, from Tarragona. I just posted a picture of myself in Tarragona on Instagram yesterday, randomly, with the Romulus and Remus statues. And he proceeded through France and to Marseille. After visiting Genoa, Lucca, Pisa, and Rome, he went to Greece and Constantinople. He visited Syria, Lebanon, and he went to Canaan, the land of Israel, which he called Shinar, because it wasn't called Israel at that point. Before reaching Baghdad, from where he went to Persia, the Arabian Peninsula, to Egypt and North Africa, returning to the Iberian Peninsula in 1173, getting right back home to where he started in Spain, doing this big old loop-de-loop thing. Lots of boats, not just all on camels. And he saw all these ruins, and he saw the world, and he had some interesting theories about the ancient time. Wandering of Benjamin III is considered something of a Jewish Don Quixote, because it's a little bit wild. I really recommend reading The Travels of Benjamin III. If you can get, I think it's been translated from Yiddish, and it's available. So it's an important book about world travel, the leaders at the time, kings, nepotism. Yesterday I mentioned a bit about the Kaifeng Jews. Benjamin of Tudela visited the Kaifeng Jews. Kaifeng Jews supposedly converted in the 6th century AD, but there's evidence of them existing even further back. And there's other groups of Jews. I forget what they're called. There's another Jewish community. Mizrahi. The Mizrahi Jews as well. And I can't remember if they're supposed to be technically, history. Dispersal. 1948 dispersal. After the establishment of the State of Israel, a lot of Mizrahi expelled by the Arab rulers or chose to leave or emigrate to Israel. So when you start to look at the Jewish diaspora, Mizrahi Jews, they say they started, okay, good. I was worried they were going to lie to you. But no, 6th century BC, which is pretty reasonable, that outside of the 6th century BC, they ended up in China. Okay? So 6th century BC, 600 years before Christ, quote unquote, already you've got huge communities of mass exodized Jews living in China, the Mizrahi Jews. That's important. So now let's get into creation myth. We could do this. The primordial waters. I'm going to probably save creation myth stuff because the title of this video has nothing to do with that. So let me see here. Go back to this work. No. Textiles. Rothschild Twitter search. That might be the one. Yes. Almost there. We're going to make this work. Well, let me start by talking about Alexandria, Egypt, again. Wiki. So we talked a little bit about Alexandria yesterday, the idea that Heliopolis used to be a city called On, and then it became Alexandria, and it was very important to the Hellenistic peoples, and here it is today, and it's still got a lot of fancy stuff going on, and there's a real ancient Egyptian romantic feel vibe to it, because they're trying to make it look like old stuff. Even Alexander was trying to harken back to a time when this was a great city, And then it was destroyed by Napoleon, taking over. And that was even a century after the Muslims destroyed it. Not a century, a millennia, right after the Muslims destroyed it. But who knows what's real. But you get the point. There's a lot of really nice things. The Roman amphitheater, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, hold on. Alexandria is also where Archimedes was raised. Let's see if I can pull that and put that here. Details of Archimedes, born 287, died 212 BC, named was Archimedes, native. I mean, some Greek will tell me, hey, that was ridiculous, but that's as close as I got. Archimedes, native to Syracuse, Italy, son of a mathematician named Phileas. I looked into Phileas, kind of hard to find, but there is a Phileas who we couldn't prove was his father. Where is that at? Phileas was an independent. So it could have been that his father was from Phleasia, and he might have not even. He might have been west by Arcadia. So it could have been like the early Frank Syrian connection there, which is kind of interesting. So another thing I saw was, let me find this out. Radiocarbon dating of seashell fragments lead contamination shows human activity at the location of Alexandria from at least the 27th century in the Old Kingdom, and again in the period of 1000 BC to 800 BC, followed by absence activity thereafter. Then the ancient Greek sources show up again. 13th century BC, you've got the Egyptians, and then so there's just big gaps in between for a while where nothing's supposedly going on, which is hard to believe because it's a perfect place for food and water to grow. Granted, there are swamps and there are crocodiles, and it's an abandoned crocodile swamp. So, maybe. But following Alexander's death in 320 CE, his general Ptolemy Lagids took possession of Egypt, brought Alexandria before Alexander's body to Egypt with him. Ptolemy at first ruled from Old Egypt capital of Memphis. He had Cleomenes executed, and in 305 BC he declared himself pharaoh and savior, Soter, the first Ptolemy, the first Soter, and moved his capital to Alexandria. We talked a bit about Ferris wheels yesterday and Zeus Ammon. I want to get into young Archimedes in school. Archimedes was the Greek inventor and mathematician who's remembered for being one of the great minds in human history. His theorems became laws in physics. You need more Archimedes pictures. Just there you go. Think about that for a second. Where is this? Are you kidding me? What is going on with this? What on earth, man? Anything? Okay, I'll work with that. So, Archimedes, this guy here, was a inventor, Greek mathematician, blah da da. He was a kid from Europe who went to Africa. Okay, he was a kid from Greece, and his family were maybe even wealthy people that came from somewhere before Greece, who got educated in Alexandria. And the reason was because his family were very not just wealthy but associated with nobility. So, born in 287 BC in the city of Syracuse on the east coast of Sicily, Archimedes gives his father's name as Phidias. But this is something I was looking into, and I found something. So, it really says Phidea to Acopatrus. Acaupatrus. Acaupatrus is, of the father, or my father, right? But the trouble with the translation is nobody heard anyone or anywhere called Acopatrus, so the translator tried alternate translations. Eventually, they replaced the K in Acopatrus with an M and changed the word spacing with that of the original letter, and they found a word that works, which was, Phidias, my father. We're not sure. It could be that my family come from, or like I herald from a place called Acaputris, or Acapatris, which is Acapulcos, but with an R. So When Archimedes completed his basic education in Sicily, Archimedes traveled to Egypt. With his education, he had already, a decent amount of education from the Greeks. Let me just fix this here. That should work. Okay. And then stretch this guy, just so I can see what's going on. When Archimedes completed his basic education, he was sent to Alexandria by the Greeks, who were known as the best places to live as Alexandria, has been reset and Hellenized. Archimedes' nobility and familial wealth, and prominence in the Syracuse royal court as a relative of King Heroi II. King Heroi. Let me see what I can do here. No, of Archimedes, man. Go back. It's probably like King Heroine. No, that's the wrong one. Hiero, there we go. I did it. See, I'm trying. Hiero II of Syracuse was the Greek tyrant of Syracuse from 275 to 215, and the illegitimate son of a Syracuse noble, Heracles, who claimed descent from Gelon. Also, so in other words, you got this tyrant who's vicious, etc. He's also the uncle or something like that. He's relatively closely related to this Archimedes character. So something important to know: Archimedes was very closely related and connected with the people at the time who were already conquering and resetting this place they weren't from. Just by the by, thought you should know that. Okay, so my little window's always going away. Archimedes' nobility and familial wealth and prominence in Syracuse court, relative of King Hiero II, who was the ruler of Syracuse. Archimedes returned to Syracuse after completing his education. Can I say Syracuse? Apparently I was told it's Syracuse, but I like Syracuse. Then he was able to learn about some of the more practical aspects of mathematical function and chemistry, as well as engineering, architecture, and masonry. He arrived home in Syracuse. I'm gonna do it with the diploma, with the new Archimedean screw, not a new screw, but called the Archimedean screw for the first time. A tool Archimedes borrowed from then ancient Egypt, existing since long before recorded history, but bringing it to Greece. Okay, so the Archimedes screw. So he shows up. He's like, guys, I have invented this thingy. And everyone was like, amazing. This is, without you, we are surely lost. Surely. And it really is a very impressive thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm hyper impressed with the Archimedean screw. It's just that it existed in ancient Egypt, and they used it in the Nile for quite some time. And so he went to school, and he came home with familiarity in some of this technology. A tool he had borrowed from ancient Egypt, existing since before recorded history, but bringing it to Greece truly revolutionized life. The people who were living in Syracuse. This was a spiral-shaped device that could be placed into a river or a dish of water, and then you could prime the system by starting the spiral. Water travel uphill in the tube or the canal, and this is made possible incredibly easy to fill buckets and canals and bathhouses with water, and to drain in underground wells and ditches. Archimedes essentially branded the device the Archimedean screw. It's now named after him, even though it's a shape found in nature, and it's a spiral. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon had, also one of the 7 wonders of the world, had Archimedean screws before Archimedes to pump the fountains in the gardens. Archimedean screw is it's so efficient that it's still used today to irrigate fields. So it's an important thing. Don't get me wrong, but he popularized something that existed before him. He's a kid who went to school in Alexandria after high school, and he learned about things that were popular there. Hemophilus, I think is a... Hemophilus? Did I get that right? No. Hemophilos? Wiki? History? Anybody? Am I spelling it wrong? No, it's got to be Hemophili... Alexandria. Way to make things hard to spell. Hemophilus. Bruh. Where did I put that thing? Okay, give me a second. I gotta find another paper somewhere here. The Magnificent. Herophilus. I knew I was doing something wrong. There we go. Herophilus. I was going to talk about this yesterday. 335 to 280. So 5 years death before Archimedes, begins, and it's even 10 years after that. So all these people educated by Herophilus ended up educating Archimedes. So he was educating the time of Herophilus, and this was when you could do anything you want in Alexandria, and supposedly, according to Tertullian, this could be a lie, but I don't think it is. Herophilus vivisected, cut open, and experimented on 600 live prisoners. So we consider him kind of the father of anatomy, the father of modern medicine, sort of the Mengele of his time. He might not have been evil, and he wrote a huge book on midwifery and women, and really kind of he studied the glands of women. He found, what's it called? Medicine, discovery. He at the time revolved around the theory of four humors, which imbalanced between bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood, led to sickness or disease. Veins were believed to be filled with blood and a mixture of air and water. Through dissections, Herophilus was able to deduce that veins were carrying only blood. After studying the flow of blood, he was able to differentiate between arteries and veins. He noticed the blood flowed through arteries, they pulsed or rhythmically throbbed. He worked out standards for measuring a pulse, even using a water clock to design to figure out the actual heartbeats. And he differentiated between the cerebrium and the cerebellum, described the optic nerve, the cornea, the pneuma, the confluence of sinuses. In the skull was originally named the torcular Herophili after him. Tocular is a Latin translation of Herophili's label, Lenos, wine vat, and wine press. Physiology of the female reproductive system. In his book Midwifery, he discussed phases and durations of pregnancy as well as causes for difficult childbirth. The aim of this work was to help midwives and other doctors of the time more fully understand the process of procreation and pregnancy. He's also credited with the discovery of the ovum, which I'm going to be very careful to go over. The Skene's gland. I'm just going to highlight it because it's the female prostate, and I'm pretty sure you're not allowed. I don't know. Can you show a Skene's gland? Don't even look at it, guys. It's not even that attractive. It's just a Skene's gland. Relax. Herophilus believed the exercise and a healthy diet were integral to an individual's body health. He once said that when health is absent, wisdom cannot reveal itself, art cannot become manifest, strength cannot become exerted, wealth is useless, and reason is powerless. So this is the world at the time that Archimedes gets to school. He's now living in a world where you're allowed to try these new things. You're allowed to experiment with old things. Things that are modern to you are ancient to them. And they just finished this period of trying to, resurgence of ancient Egyptian technology. Clearly, the ancient Egyptians had records of health in better ways than the Dark Ages. But the humors and things, these aren't Middle Age ideas. These are Hellenistic ideas. These are Greek ideas. And the Greeks are, they're not using Babylonian math. And so they're trying to build things up instead of just building a pattern that we can emerge from. Maybe it's a time to finish my Feynman video.
Ancient mathematics. Euclidean or Greek method, and I would like to say you him instead of the other. Another statement which is a little that's doing the sweeping, and the total of all of that is not changing in time. That's a generalization, obviously, of the other one. Incidentally, the total of that is called the angular momentum, and this is called the law of conservation of angular momentum. Conservation just means that it doesn't change. Now, one of the consequences of this is, just to show what it's good for, imagine a lot of stars falling together to form a nebula, or a galaxy. As they come closer in, If they were very far out and moving slowly, so there was a little bit of area being generated, but on very long arms, distances from the center. Then if the thing falls in, the distances to the center are shorter now. If all the stars are now close in, then these radii are smaller. And in order to sweep out the same area, they have to go a lot faster. So as the things come in, they swirl around, and thus we can roughly understand the qualitative shape of the spiral nebulae. You can also understand in the same way, exactly the same way a skater spins when you start with a leg out, moving slowly, and as you pull the leg in, it spins faster because when the leg is out, it's contributing, when it's moving slowly, a certain amount of area per second, and then when it comes in to get the same area, you have to go around faster. But I didn't prove it for the skater. The skater uses muscle force. Gravity is a different force, yet it's true for the skater. Now we have a problem. We can deduce often from one part of physics, like the law of gravitation, a principle, which turns out to be much more valid than the derivation. This doesn't happen in mathematics, that the theorems come out in places where they're not supposed to be. In other words, if we were to say that the postulates of physics were the law of gravitation, we could deduce the conservation of angular momentum, but only for gravitation. But we discover experimentally that the conservation of angular momentum is a much wider thing. Now, Newton had other postulates by which he could get the more general conservation law of angular momentum, but Newtonian laws were wrong. There's no forces, it's all a lot of baloney, the particles don't have orbits, and so on. Yet, the analog, the exact transformation of this principle about the areas, the conservation of angular momentum, is true with atomic motions in quantum mechanics and is still, as far as we can tell today, exact. So we have these wide principles which sweep across all the different laws. And if one takes too seriously his derivations and feels that this is only valid because this is valid, you cannot understand the interconnections of the different branches of physics. Someday, when physics is complete, then maybe with this kind of argument, we know all the laws, then we could start with some axioms, and no doubt somebody will figure out a particular way of doing it. And then all the deduction will be made. But while we don't know all the laws, we can use some to make guesses at theorems which extend beyond the proof. So in order to understand the physics, one must always have a neat balance and contain in his head all of the various propositions and their interrelationships, because the laws often extend beyond the range of their deductions. This will only have no importance when all the laws are known.
So that's rad. That's rad, and the reason that's rad is because you got a guy who believes in stuff. He believes in it, and he gets really excited. I've seen this guy when he gets older talking about atomism and everything, and he really believes what he believes. But because he does Babylonian-style mathematics, which is variable-based equations, and it can change, and what you're basing your grounding principles on can be wrong, even in that circumstance, it doesn't matter what he believes. It doesn't matter what he understands to be true about up or down or anything, because they become just degrees or axes. So that's a really important thing to understand about Babylonian mathematics and why it was so influential in Egypt, because they could literally understand things without knowing what was really going on. And Greeks had to believe that they knew what was going on. Hellenists were like, well, that's because God went click. That's where a lot of this modern issue comes from. And we think of the Greeks as being these humanists, and they're very like Hellenists are supposed to be super wise. No, I'm sorry. Those are people that came from Alexandria, from the Syracuse, were invaders to Sicily. The islands of giants, the Moors, we all know this. We've all talked about the Thracians, the Tartarians, the Athenians' original interest in ancient Egypt, the Amun Zeus that we just talked about yesterday. So we know that the Greeks are kind of confused on what they believe, but they're trying to base it on practicing principles that are happening in ancient Egypt. Well, they don't really know what ancient Egypt is, because there really is some lost stuff by the time they're looking into it, and they rename everything, and they're like, this thing, it's the bird from The Little Mermaid. And he picks up a fork, and he's like, what you got here is a genuine hair combing thingy, and that's a lot of what the Greeks did to ancient Egypt. So back to Archimedes, though. They're like, why don't you go down there and get an education? If you're down there and getting an education, you might be able to tell us what's going on. You might be able to help us out, and that would be a huge deal to us because we don't know what's going on anymore. We could all die really easily. So Archimedes says, okay, we're going to learn about this stuff. We're going to learn about flood systems, the seasons, lunar calendars, architecture, everything else. And he comes back with, not just the screw, but all sorts of ideas that permeate the rest of humanity afterwards. And the dude won't bathe. Sometimes he'll bathe 5 times a day. He's just completely insane, which is awesome. I mean, that's what you want. You want a crazy guy like Archimedes. And there's all these great stories about how he was forced to take a bath, and then he found out buoyancy, and that's, obviously we know that buoyancy is a much more ancient story, but then stories about Archimedes himself become legends to the rest of Greeks and to kids who learn you could become a scientist if you just think like Archimedes. But Archimedes, dude, you got all these pictures of him where he looks like a nice guy. He was covered in tattoos. He's constantly writing formulas all over his body, and he was super. This is really, what the heck am I even looking at here? So he was covered in Egyptian priest math all the time. He was constantly worshiping math. That was a big thing to Archimedes, was the worship of math and the worship of sciences. So, a Roman architect, Vitruvius, told this story based on the tale handed down generations. Everyone's heard this story. Any engineer's heard this story. A local goldsmith in Syracuse was commissioned to create a golden wreath crown out of pure gold. These crowns were placed on the heaven of the statues of the Greek gods and the goddesses in order to pay tribute to them. However, once King Hiero II got the crown back, he was surprised by its weight, which he believed that the goldsmith possibly swindled him out of some of the gold by creating a crown using silver and then plating it with gold. However, he had no way to prove this without damaging the crown. Archimedes was given the task of figuring out if the golden crown was truly made of gold, or if it was simply gold plating on cheaper metal. After he was given the problem to solve, he became obsessed with this. It was all he could think about day or night. He would write down mathematical equations till he ran out of paper, and then cover his body with them, without positive results, just like always. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped bathing. Very relatable guy. When he tried to solve this problem, eventually his students dragged him to the bathhouse to clean himself off because he was beginning to become more beast than mathematician. You like that? I like that. When he laid down in the bath, some of the water splashed over the edge of the tub. He realized that the weight of his body dispersed the water, and in excess had to leave the tub in order to accommodate his body. Suddenly, he realized that he could use this to solve the issue of the golden crown. Apparently, he was so excited by this discovery there, he jumped out of the bathtub and ran down the street shouting, "Eureka, I have found it," allegedly, without ever bothering to get dressed. And everyone said, "There goes that crazy old naked mathematics guy we love so much." Good old Archimedes. Friend of the town. He realized by putting a weight of gold equal to the crown and knowing to be pure in a bowl of water, he was able to displace the amount of water that would be that particular amount of mass to the brim. The gold would be removed in the king's crown and put in its place. Alloy of lighter silver would increase the bulk of the crown for the weight. Once Archimedes proposed a solution to the king, they compared the containers of water side by side. It was clear that the goldsmith had in fact taken a lot of gold for himself and given the king a gold-plated crown. Sufficient evidence to find him guilty of stealing from the king. Okay, so that's one of the stories about Archimedes, and it does get us into that idea of the Egyptian pyramid buoyancy, that they were aware of buoyancy formulas. And if you recall, is that Martha Stewart? That's based. If you recall, yesterday we talked a bit about the mathematical formulas that were used in ancient Egypt and how they became popular. I think you can watch the episode yesterday if you want, but if you do Babylonian mathematics, Pythagoras, you can find 1,000 years earlier use of the Pythagorean theorem, and so it gets really obvious when you do this to see, well, no, he didn't invent this stuff, but he was popularized because he wasn't the first guy to know, but he was the first Greek to know, or the first Syracusan to know in the area. So he was very important. Don't get me wrong. Pythagoras was important. Archimedes was important. But they're important mainly because they're our guy. They're our guy. That's what they look at him at. And when you start to dig deeper, you find plenty of evidence that this is not the first time that this technology was used. Lost my journal publication. And you can even see it wasn't even in Egypt originally, that some of this stuff comes from the Edomites, the metal workers who were elites. Someone sent me a video yesterday I have to watch on volcano gods, even though I made a video just now recently about the volcano god experience. The idea of craft and technology and metallurgy being so important is just, it's pervasive all over the world, that they think of the gods as crafters, not just magicians, but metal workers. So something to consider there. I'll go back to some pictures of Archimedes while I finish reading to you guys. Is there a young Archimedes? That's a cool picture, but Young Archimedes and Other Stories by Aldous Huxley. That's something worth checking out. We'll talk about that in a second. The Burning Mirror. Let's focus on that picture. That's adorable, isn't it? That's a nice picture. Okay. Throughout his lifetime, King Hiero II continued to bring his request to Archimedes, and he was often challenging his mind to create the impossible. The king commissioned him to build a vessel known as the Syracuse EF to be one of the largest boats ever built in ancient times. So again, his understanding of buoyancy is mathematically perfect, using formulas that exist for thousands of years before him to make giant boats. More evidence of the flotation of stones in the pyramids, because again, he learned all this from Egypt. Massive dining halls serving the finest food, and gymnasiums, a library, and temple objects, all on this giant boat, just to show how possible it was to build the biggest boat and still have it work. Displacement. Cruises. Syracuse celebrated its completion. 2,000 people were allowed on board. One of the biggest boats ever. Let's see. Building. Anything else? First geometric proofs that Archimedes had. He was so obsessed with calculating math problems. Carried around a tray of sand with him so that he could trace calculations with his fingers. One of his most significant contributions to math came from his publication called The Measurement of the Circle, where he figured out the ratio of circles' circumference to the diameter at being pi 3.14. Except he worked on calculating the volume and surface area of various shapes and objects. Even created the system of using exponents to describe large numbers. Before this time, Greek scientists would perform an experiment and draw conclusions from it afterwards. Interesting, because you can consider 60-base math and different maths to be a form of exponents. If in certain respects you can use them as a form of exponent, and so he's been trying to translate that into Greek variable equations. So one of those people who does all the math and proves reality from math rather than making math about real life. Then there's that war with the Carthaginians, and he ends up building weapons for him. You have Greek fire, you have the windows, you have focused glasses and mirrors. Roman soldiers finally killed him. They found Archimedes. Let me see if I can find that. Where's this? They found Archimedes' grave, right, or his tomb or something like that. Curious tomb of Archimedes, and it's hidden into the stones a bit, and it's on a hotel front yard or something. They recently tried to fix it up because the hotel was like, "Hey, look what we found here," and some people were like, "Oh, that's just a hotel trying to fake it." No, this is a real monument to his death. So his tomb, I think, is the thing there, and you can see his tomb is. It's kind of pretty, but it's really what it is. It's stone. It's just cut into actual stone. So he's taken a mountain and carved it out. So it's interesting that these are caves that have been converted for Archimedes. We talked a bit about the Kenites yesterday. I'll bring them up again as well. A nomadic tribe of from ancient Levant. The Kenites were coppersmith and metalworkers, descendants of Cain, plays an important role in his history of ancient Israel. Although the Kenites descended from Recheb, and maintained a distinct nomadic lifestyle. So they're their own group of people, and at the end of the day, they continue to not follow Abram's law necessarily, but the Bible mentions the Kenites as living in and around Canaan as early as the time of Abraham. So they're the ones who didn't necessarily convert. At the time of Exodus, Jethro and his clans inhabited the vicinity of Mount Sinai and Horeb. So Moses' father-in-law Jethro was a Kenite, a resident in the land of Midian. And he says that his descendants went up to the city of palms and with men of Judah to live with the people of the desert of Judah in Negev near Arad. The city of palms also appears to be Zorah or Tamar in the upper Arabah. According to Exodus 3:1, Jethro is said to have been a priest in the land of Midian and a resident of Midian. This has led many scholars to believe that the term are intended, at least in parts of the Bible, to be used interchangeably, or that Kenites formed a part of the Midianite tribal grouping. The Kenites journeyed with the Israelites to Canaan, and their encampment apart from the ladders was noticed by Balaam. And Balaam is the diviner in the Torah, whose stories begin in chapter 22, the book of Numbers. Every ancient reference to Balaam considers him non-Israelite prophet. So something to know is that there's a prophet of the Israelites who's Goyim, and he's perhaps, he could be Babylonian, but he could also be literally a member of the Kenites, just a Canaanite who hadn't quite been of the tribe of Abraham. So important to study Balaam, and we'll get into Balaam at some point. It's all a bunch of Balami. At a later period, some of the Kenites separated from the brethren in the south and went to live in northern Canaan in Judges 4:11, where they lived in the time of King Saul. The kindness which they had shown to Israel in the wilderness was greatly remembered. Ye showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt, said Saul to them. And so, not only were they spared by him, but David allowed them to share in the spoils that he took from the Amalekites. Amalekites. There we go. Other well-known Kenites were Heber, the husband of Jael, and Rechab, the ancient ancestor of the Rechabites. Rechabites. There we go. I did it. They're a clan, worked with iron. It comes back into here. First, textiles. Didn't I have another thing there? Did I lose it? It's gone. First textiles from King David era discovered at Timnah copper mine. And remember yesterday we talked about Timnah a bit. Let me show you Timnah. Timnah Valley is located in southern Israel, and this is what it looks like. And there's volcanoes in Timnah that have been active, and there's these crazy rocks, which we've talked about, that have been carved, and there's life that has lived there that has been fossilized, and it's a pretty interesting place. So Timnah Valley, copper mining. Copper has been mined in the area since 6th century BC, probably older. Domesticated camels. Some of the oldest domesticated camels outside the United States, or the Americas, because, of course, camels did cross the land bridge, allegedly. And we have older camels here that died out. Modern history. Nelson Glueck attributed the copper mining at Timnah to King Solomon. Solomon's supposed to be the super wise guy, and to be able to mine and to work with copper in the Bronze Age, copper was more difficult to work with. So they had to have better equipment, better skills, better technology, better understanding, better history with it. Site 200. In 1969, an excavation took place at Site 200, also dubbed the Egyptian Sanctuary, that allowed for researchers to debate a new chronological framework. The framework was imposed on the entire Iron Age, smelting sites throughout the Valley of Timnah. However, Site 200 was known to present complications and inconsistencies, even though it was used for correlation and to date smelting and mining sites. The complex stratigraphy of Site 200 for dating usages creates confusion and irregularities during the study and excavations. Consensus about the New Kingdom dating of smelting sites together with radiocarbon dates from other sites with Kuraya painted ware that were assigned in a later date led researchers Bimson and Teebs to conclude that dates currently given to mining and smelting operations in southern Arabia produced a number of chronological anomalies and tensions. Taking together these suggests the need for lower dates for the New Kingdom of Egypt, which would in turn allow a lower date for the late Bronze Iron Age period. Okay, so this is big deal stuff. This is like where people start to admit that the calendar is a lie, that it's all off, and that this isn't really what's going on. That maybe some of this stuff happened more recently, and that some of the things that we think were more recent are older. But mostly this is about things being more recent, and that we need to work on a lower date to understand when the New Kingdom formed, because the New Kingdom might have been closer to the older kingdom than we realize. And those times in between might not have been, get this, they might not have been absent of culture. They might have been erased of culture, right? And we think about Akhenaten, and he was erased of culture. And this is the Damnatio Memoriae. Damnatio Memoriae. I can't spell anymore. Damnatio Memoriae. Sorry. a modern Latin phrase meaning condemnation of memory. It's basically getting canceled. And back when you got canceled then, they would completely remove your Netflix special. It's like Roseanne, like it's gone. So they got rid of these people, and then they could say there was nothing there. It was a ghost town, except for that time they invaded and we had to kill them, and there was an emperor then. And there's just not a lot of records for centuries in between things, so we just say, oh, there's nothing there. But elephant in the room, that's a bunch of nonsense. Oh, let's do this really quickly. So KV55 and the younger lady. I've been meaning to do this for days. I just never get around to it. So KV55 in the Valley of the Kings the Valley of the Kings in Egypt is discovered in 1907 by Edward R. Arton. While he was working the valley for Theodore M. Davis, it has long been speculated, as well as much disputed, the body found in the tomb was that of the famous King Akhenaten. Now, everyone was like, no, surely not, can't be possible, because he's supposed to have never been put in the normal tomb site in the Valley of the Kings. I mean, why would you put Akhenaten in the Valley of the Kings? Then again, KV55 is all weird. Valley of the Kings. It's most of the graves you have are like super duper fancy. This one was inside of a box with the spells faced inward. Normally it's you have spells on the outside to keep something safe from being penetrated, right? But this was more, you had something that was designed to be kept inside. And so everyone has that story, the mummy spirit that they're trying to lock inside the box and never let him out. I don't know. It's a thing. But they did DNA tests. And so I had heard about this when I was young, and it wasn't a big deal. But then I had never checked into it in like 2010 or whatever it was. DNA, where's this at? DNA shows probably not Akhenaten. So that immediately proved, not really, but kind of proved that there's something more interesting here. It shows that it said probably Akhenaten, states that the mummy is probably Akhenaten in 2010. Hereafter, the JAMA paper, the media has accepted the attribution as a firm fact. All of the attribution has attracted considerable comment and debate, with a number of writers questioning the forensic data. I believe, however, that the correct focus of dissent to the attribution should be the STR analysis, which shows that KV55 mummy is highly unlikely to be Akhenaten, and that an alternate family tree is better fit to the genetic findings of the Hawass study. Okay, and so then it talks about the younger lady, a previously unknown wife of Akhenaten. So this is the other thing that was found, and there's a DNA test. Recent DNA tests, the mummy has been identified as the mother of Pharaoh Tutankhamun and the daughter of Pharaoh Amenhotep. So they thought at first that this was going to be Nefertiti, because of course Nefertiti is the mother, right? Wrong. Nowhere is Nefertiti accorded to the king's daughter, and the DNA is different. So eventually you start to find this connection to this other royal family, the Moses royal family, and again, this Ra Moses is already the name of Ramses, so it's not that weird that you've got a Moses Akhenaten lineage. And you start to look into, so the younger lady, that's the most important thing about the younger lady I had to bring up. In the JAMA paper, Hawass outlines that they see most likely 5-generational family tree, including the identification of the KV55 mummy and the KV35YL as full siblings, which is a younger lady. I accept the family tree with the exception of the sibling identification, which I believe should be questioned, and identification of Akhenaten. And so then you get into this whole thing, like, who is this other family tree? Who's Yuya? And we talked about this before, but I just want to... Yuya, Wiki, Joseph in the Bible, same exact time. There's a guy who comes in, Semitic, and he takes over. He's just the highest underneath Pharaoh, marries into the royal family, and then it leads to this guy who introduces a Semitic monotheistic, henotheistic cult that takes over Egypt and is remembered for the erasure of Egyptian culture and the beginning of New Egypt. So post-Ramoses Egypt. And you look at this and it's like, bruh, that's Joseph, man. That's Moses in the Bible. So the son of the great grand, like 4 generations uncle, great grand uncle. The age of the death of KV55 mummy has attracted considerable debate based on skeletal skeletal and dental remains contentious since the paper identifies the KV mummy is not Akhenaten on genetic grounds. I don't discuss forensic assessment at the age of the death in detail. However, I did note in passing that once identification of KV-55 as Akhenaten is set aside, this forensic data ceases to be problematic. So there's also Akhenaten, which was the name of the member, enters Smemkare, and this is, some people think it's Smemkare, who is the most erased pharaoh, more than Akhenaten, because he didn't do as much as Akhenaten. He was trying to be helpful, and so because Akhenaten was there's more to erase of him. You can still find some of the broken stuff. Smenkhare is probably the most confusing character that we want to know the most about, and he didn't do that much in his lifetime that we know about, so it's all lost. So could this be this family that we're talking about that's lost, of Moses's lost tribe family? And then there's also this Midianite Kenite hypothesis revisited, and the origins of Judah. The Kenite and Midianite Kenites hypothesis is the origin of the cult of Yahweh first came into prominence in the late 19th century. It rests on four bases: an interpretation of the biblical text dealing with the Midianite connections to Moses. By the way, this is a BC thing, in case you were thinking it was super flamenco. Allusions in ancient poetic compositions to the original residence of Yahweh, Egyptian topographical texts from the 14th to the 12th century, and Cain as the eponymous ancestor of the Kenites. This article discusses the implications of the hypothesis for the ethnic origins of Judah. Brittany, grab me that paper so I can read that to you guys tomorrow. We get into the Kenites a bit. Let me jump to... We did some of the younger lady stuff. The pelvic floor was messed up. Gutian rule in Mesopotamia was a dynasty that came into power in Mesopotamia in 2199 to 2119. After placing the Akkadian Empire, it ruled for approximately 1 century. However, some copies of the Sumerian kings list vary between 4 and 25 years. In other words, there's a missing king from the Gutian rule. The end of the Gutian dynasty is marked by the accession of Ur-Nammu, the founder of the third dynasty of Ur. And we've gotten into Ur a bit, and we're going to get into Ur a lot more tomorrow. But Ur-Nammu is the king of Ur and the king of Sumer and Akkad. And so we look into this idea of this temple, which was originally built to the goddess wife, apparently, became the ziggurat of Ur-Nammu. And it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be a goddess's temple. And at the time, so much of this was done by women because women ran the economy, the runnings of the house, as it's termed. So there's a lot of women in charge. And then men start taking over. And this is something that came up before. I was talking with Adam Krigler about how brewers used to be women a lot in Europe until they started burning them for being witches for breweries. Well, similarly, women were starting to be removed from power of finances by certain groups who had conquered places. And after an earthquake, especially, their infrastructure was knocked out. And so Ur-Nammu became Ur-Nammu. And that's the beginning of, there you go. See, look, I'm not even wrong. Ur-Nammu became Ur-Nammu. See? I'm not even making this stuff up. That just blows my mind that this is all openly available for you to learn now. Because when I was a kid, you had to go to the Rosicrucian Temple. And it was really weird, dude. I remember when I went to the Rosicrucian Temple as a kid, I walked in the first time, and they're like, no flash photography. And then I took a photo, and they all looked at me like, you just, like, cursed your soul, man. You took a photo of a mummy. Or maybe they're like, hey, dude, disrespectful because you're 11. But another time I go to the Rosicrucian Museum, and they're like, well, would you like to go? I was like, well, where do we start? I'm like, well, you could go into the photo room, or you could go to the left. And I was like, or the right, or whatever it was. And I was like, what would you recommend? And the way they say it, like, they're like, we're not recommending, but like, obviously, you want to go into the painting room, right? Wouldn't you like to see the gallery? So you go in this gallery, and there's all of these Rosicrucian members have painted these. And there's a kid who's maybe like 19 too, and you're like, dude, you think you are gonna be mummified, bro? Like, what is even happening? Like, he's wearing all black. He's really anorexically skinny, and he's just like, I love Egypt. And I'm like, good for you. Well, he leads us astray. We pass all these statues that should be Neep, like the bull of his own mother, right? The person who inseminates his own mother and has himself as his own child, turned into statues of rams. And you go inside, and all of a sudden see these pictures of ghosts and just double exposures of like, like creepy things made recently. And you're walking around like, is there any explanation for this? Is this just like a terrifying occult gallery? Luckily, I'm from Santa Cruz, so it's not that out of the question. But a lot of other people were like, what is this? And then we move on to the actual museum. Like, okay, is there anything else in that room? They're like, no, you saw it. Well, thanks a lot, Rosicrucians. So then you move from there to the Amorc tour, and it's pretty cool. Because there are a lot of, first they have, most of the building is just die cast from another temple in Egypt, a tomb. Because Californians, we're good at copying things with waxes and molds and stuff. So you really do have a die-cast copy. But the other thing is you have real corpses, real mummies. And you think, okay, a mummy in London, maybe maybe in Paris, but like even New York City, a mummy would be weird. You wouldn't really be. It's kind of unlikely in more contemporary times. So the fact they have just mummies behind glass, like a lizard in a cage, it's pretty trippy. All right, well, I want to jump a little bit further ahead because we only have maybe 10 minutes, not to freak you guys out, but we talked about Libyan desert glass the other day, and I'm going to get into volcanoes more tomorrow. So I want to set you guys up for this idea that it's very unusual for a temperature to reach hot enough and then cool down quickly enough that you have this flash glassification. And that's, we've associated with nuclear, with giant explosions. With the Terminator, if you ever watched the Terminator, there's that great scene where all the sand turns to glass because he's standing there. But there could be other explanations. One of them is this pressurized volcano. We talked a bit about Harouj, which is a large volcanic field spread across 42,000 kilometers, so 17,000 square miles in central Libya. So this is not a little volcano. This is a number of volcanic flumes out of a supervolcano. And it hasn't erupted in a while. Let's see, the most recent one was between 2,300 and 810 years ago. Okay? Is that right? Yeah. The Holocene. Yeah. So we're living in the Holocene. So yeah, so in other words, this wasn't even that long ago. We openly admit that this happened. 150 volcanoes, basaltic scoria stones. And they're saying, how could it be that there's desert glass around here? Well, you got to look into the nuclear testing and why they were. And I put that video up, and I hope you guys are all watching the Operation Plowshare video. But they planned on going out here and dealing with lost technology that existed before. And there's just crazy stuff out here. There's lava lakes, which are just, they're not erupting a lot of the time. Even today, there's just lava lakes. They're just hanging out. So these are the places that you could imagine where a lot of volcanic worshippers continued to thrive, although they moved on and would visit these places because you can't really live on top of some of these active volcanoes. So it became a major site for the Bedouin and for the Kenites and the nomads, particularly the nomads. And so the Kenites are nomads, and that's why the Ishmaelites, who were sent to wander because they lost the land of Jacob, they are obsessed with the ancient traditions, the ancient gods, and they were, if they're forced out of Abraham's cult, then they're introduced again to the Edomite cult. So when people talk about Asherah, the goddess married to the volcano god, yeah, it's all because these are the cultures that were interacting with each other at the time. Okay, so I'm gonna save that for another. There's another volcano I want you to know is Wa on Namuz, also located on the eastern Fezzan region. It has yielded an age of about 200,000 years, but other circumstantial evidence points to a formation during the Holocene, right? And we say Holocene so that you don't realize this is a recent time, even historical times. This probably emerged very recently. And you'll notice around it there's water, too. So everything you understand about volcanoes in the desert, just you got to understand, volcanoes are also a source of water, a source of oases, a source of geysers. Springs are essentially forms of volcanoes. So they would have looked at this as a God has, wiped out everything else and then given just you a little bit of water. So it's a very sweet thing of God to do. And we'll go into this a bit more, I think, tomorrow. This idea, was the Mohenjo-Daro massacre real? We'll have to talk about Mohenjo-Daro, the Pakistani fort, ziggurat. We'll talk about ziggurats too. There's a couple videos I saw I wanted to recommend. I think Jared Booster is a channel. That was one yesterday. I'd seen some videos. I thought he did a pretty good job. Just wanted to shout that out. Oh, here's a quick thing I'm meaning to say. So a couple weeks ago, I think there was a video that Mind and Veil put out, and he talked about Spirited Away. And I there's no way he got it from me or anything. But I was just watching it, and it was interesting. It was just a crazy sync, but I never talked about it. So it's a synchronicity. We're on the same wave on that one. It was kind of interesting. But I do have something to add to it. When I was a kid, I went to the Santa Cruz County Fair. Let me look for pictures. Santa Cruz County Fair. Let me see what I got there. Racing pigs. Okay, so this is my Spirited Away story. The racing pigs. And when we were kids, we had to do you'd race the pigs. People would train their pigs and they'd do this race, and every kid was supposed to write a story about what they saw that day at the fair. And everyone came in with like half a page that their parents had written for them, except for me, because I came into my second or third grade class, I think it was third grade, with a story. And so my story was like 20 pages long, and for whatever reason the teacher kind of let me read for like at least 5 or 6 of the pages, which is enough to really get the story going. So I'm gonna tell it to you now as best I could remember, because I can't quite remember it perfectly in the sense I don't have the story from third grade, but here it goes. Okay. Long ago, this again, what I saw at the county fair, the Santa Cruz County Fair by Andreas, Nicholas, 1997, paraphrase. What I saw at the fair. So, long ago, humans and pigs actually used to be the same species. And again, this is a story from second grade, just right now. And people connect them with monkeys, but the science is all off, and really, monkeys are devolved even further. It all comes back to pigs. Humans are actually devolved from pigs as well. There's a primordial ancestor that is this swine supermensch, uber swine, that was in charge of everybody. And over time, they evolved to become so advanced. Let me see if I can do. Oh, I got it. I know the picture. This is what I need. Over time, the pigs got so advanced that they were able to defeat nature, that they were able to control the river systems, and they created so many products, synthetics, and they didn't have to eat meat anymore, and they became just the most advanced civilization that has ever existed that we're familiar with. Unfortunately, because of some clerical errors and lack of awareness of feedback loops, I swear, this is the second grade version of my story, that they create, and that makes sense too, because it was global warming, was Scholastic magazine, so don't give me too much credit, but the civilization found out that the world's greenhouse gases were expanding, and there's all kinds of problems for their environment, and that pretty soon it was going to become uninhabitable where they lived. So what were they going to do? So the space pigs decided they were going to go find a new place to be, and they were going to live in space in the meantime until they either got to that place or they were going to get off the Earth for just long enough that maybe in 100 years it would set it back to normal, or 1,000 years, or maybe 1,000 years it'll set it back to normal, right? And that if they just come back, it'll be fine. And most of the pigs went to space, and that's how most of the pigs escaped Earth and made it to space, and they traveled the stars. Again, this is my second, third grade story. And I hadn't read Homer's Odyssey in second grade, I don't think. Maybe I'd heard it, but I don't think I was too familiar with people being turned to pigs. And I really wasn't a big fan of the Muppets. So I don't know. I think this was really just because of what I saw at the county fair. Anyway, again, because the pig races. So these pigs who've been in space for 1,000 years are not the only pigs. Some of the pigs didn't leave Earth. Some of the pigs stayed on Earth, and they tried to deal with it. And there was actually two kinds. The kinds on Earth, the Earthling pigs that stayed, some of them went underground, and they devolved into these things that could survive without sunlight. And they had, their hooves frayed outwards into fingers, and they they started to have to climb in strange ways that led them to be bipedal and all this other crap. That was my story. And then simultaneously, some of the pigs stayed on the surface, and they tried to handle the environmental shifts that came, and to their own demise, because it was brain rotting heat and parasitic mind control and just all kinds of horrible things. It devolved the land pigs, and the land pigs eventually were just, they're just swimming around in mud. And so this is what's left on Earth. You've got these cave people, and then the cave people, after maybe a certain amount of time, they start to evolve. They're civilized enough. Still, they still have their brains. They're just evil. So they come out of the caves, and then they start to consume their brethren, these pigs who've lost their minds in the sun. The lowest form of civilization, cannibalism. And then the space pigs. So the space pigs are coming back. Finally, they look at their ship, and their robots say, hey, it's time. You can come back to Earth and you'll be safe. And when you get to Earth, just know things will have changed, because AI is pretty coherent at this time. So the ship shows up, and it flies right over where they used to live, right where the ancient Swine Temple used to be in Monterey. Now it's called Monterey, California. It's close to a place called Santa Cruz. It's right on the coast of California. It's one of the places that the Spaniards it's a very important place in history, even today, for some reason. But it was the temple to the ancient pigs. And so the ancient pigs in space are flying over where their temple was, and they realize their temple's gone. And instead, there's this just big field. And there's a Harusian Ferris wheel, and there's a few things they're familiar with. Like they still have some of the architecture, but for the most part, it just looks like this madness of a. It says, and they can't quite read it, but their AI can tell them. It says something about a Santa Cruz, so this holy broken cross county, which they assume must mean like country, and then fair, so they think it's justice or something like that. So they're flying overhead, and again. I'm just gonna keep going with it. They get to Santa Cruz County Fair pig race. Again, they get to see the Santa Cruz County Fair pig racing start. Okay, now so simultaneously to all of this that's been going on, there's been a pig named what was his name? I think it was Snowflake or. Snowflake might be right. I think it was Snowflake or Periwinkle or something cute. I remember. And this is again because this is what happened to me. I'm at the fair, and then they say, "All right, and all the Santa Cruz pigs, get ready, set, go." And so I'm thinking at the same time, there's a spaceship above head, and it's looking down at these pigs, and they're like, "What's going on?" And they're smacked on that behind, and they're sent running, and these pigs are like, "Am I gonna get killed?" And they're being chased. They look around them, and there's other pigs running, and they're like, "I'm being chased by these guys," and they're freaking out. And the pigs in space are looking at this, and they're like, "What is going on? What is happening? How could?" I'm gonna cut back and forth because it tells the story better. How could this have happened to our wonderful pigs? How are they, being chased by? And so Snowflake, who's lived his life as a pretty decent little pig back home on Earth in Santa Cruz, and he's been told, you're gonna race and you could win the race, and he doesn't understand. It's like Babe, I think is also the thing here, that he's probably gonna get killed because he wins this race, but he doesn't know, so he's just running. He's running on his own, as fast and as far as he can, and it's insufferable to the space pigs, who have known that they were the greatest master pigs of all time, and to watch their society to break down, and to see that these are like these deformed cave pigs with these fingers that are racing these, pigs that pretty much look still like them, but they're brainwashed. It's a lot for them to bear. And again, they're just like, it's not fair. It's not a Santa Cruz County fair. It's a Santa Cruz County unfair. I know I'm a third grader at this point, but I think it's still worth it. So Snowflake is running, and he's realizing as he's running, he's getting closer and closer to a wall. And he's like, that's not good. That's the end of where I'm going. Where am I going to be? How am I going to get out of this? And so he's looking at this wall, and he starts praying. And so Snowflake says, please, you're God of the pigs, holy Ganesh, get me out of this. A little bit of Ganesh for you there. So simultaneously, he's praying. Come on. So simultaneously, he's praying to Ganesh, the god of the pigs, and he's thinking to himself, I don't know what to do, but I'm going to keep running, because if I keep running, I might make it. The irony being that the god of the pigs are being prayed to by the pigs in space as well, and they pray to Ganesh. And Ganesh is seeing all this unfold, and he's worried. And so finally, the pigs say, we got to stop this. We can't let this happen anymore to these pigs. And so as Snowflake starts running, he looks on either side of him, and his little tiny feet stop hitting the ground, but they're still hitting something, but they're hitting air. And he's looking back and forth, and the other pigs are still on the ground, and he's just pumping and pumping and pumping. And finally, he reaches into the sky, and he looks around him, and he's like, what is happening? Because, he's a normal pig, as far as they understand. But he starts flying away, and he's looking on either side of himself, and he's like, whoa, I'm flying. I'm going to make it. Thank Ganesh. And then he goes up, and simultaneously, all of the fair people, the owner of the pig, the farmer, the kid who loved his pig and was kind of sad that the dad was going to kill the pig, and everybody, including the narrator. The narrator's like, well, Snowflake is coming around the corner. He's nearly to the front of this line, and then all of a sudden, what's going on? Ladies and gentlemen, Snowflake is leaving the ground. He starts to fly. He's flying away. There's a spaceship. And all of a sudden, Snowflake lands in the spaceship. He's abducted in the spaceship. And he meets the other space pigs. And they give him some food, and they help him out, and they remind him of who he is, who he comes from, where he comes from, and what really happened that led to the evolution of the pigs and the loss of the great swine empire and the beginning of the human cannibalism of pigs. And we have to do something to work together to stop it. And because of the food that they've given him, it's helped a lot, and he starts to become cognate and coherent. And about this point of the story is where my teacher says, because the pig's flying away, she's like, you were supposed to write a story about what you saw at the fair that day. And I said, that is what I saw at the fair that day. And yeah, so that's my pig story. There's a lot more to that story, by the way. That's the first 5 pages, but we'll leave it for now. Anyway, glad you guys watched this today. Hope you have a good day. Let me check and see if there's any super chats. I see some stuff. Let me just check. If there's no super chats, guys, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to live? Nope, there's one. Great. Brian Banks, I missed you, broski. Hope to see you in a month. Dude, Byron Banks. Good. Love you, bro. And let's see what else is there. I think that's it. Okay, send me more super chats. Go to Xirtus.com. Go to Andreas.me. Like, share, subscribe, support. Keep this happening, because otherwise, what are we going to do? What are we going to do, everybody? We need to work with each other. Gotta get this working out. So, love you. Nomini Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Ciao. Oh, where's my button? Oh, here it is.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot to Kent Woods for the super chat. Keep me alive, guys. I appreciate it. We'll finish the pig story. I promise. The audacity of a 5-minute intro and outro. Shame on me. Peace and love, everybody. Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.